Right, so as atrocities between Israel and Iran have moved into a third day, Israel's excuses and justifications over their ongoing attacks whilst wailing victim at Iranian return fire is winning them no fans at all, despite the mass media attempts to paint Iran as the ones at fault here. People are not buying it, and you merely need to point out the Israeli actions versus Iranian strikes to by and large demonstrate this, where Iran have targeted major infrastructure and military targets with precision strikes, needing to be precision to keep casualties to a minimum, given Israel placed such targets as a rule in residential areas, whereas Israel have now targeted apartment buildings, residential areas where there are no such Iranian assets, and even a student dormitory over the last 24 hours. Still, global leaders talk of Israel's right to defend themselves, don't they? Talk of sending assets out to defend their own interests in the Middle East, whilst also talking about aiding their allies, which blatantly means fighting for Israel, doesn't it? And there is no national interest to be had from such action. That they are so in hoc to the Israel lobby that, never mind public opinion shifting ever further against Israel and in defence of Iran's sovereign right to defend itself, as talk now turns increasingly to Iranian regime change, what we are looking at is Western leaders hurtling towards global war for no other reason than to defend an apartheid state, engaged in war all for one man, trying to keep his own genocidal backside in power. Are we really going to see escalating wider warfare to defend Benjamin Netanyahu ultimately? All of the mistakes made over Iraq 20 years ago showing no lessons have been learned by anyone over that, clearly, because surely what we're now seeing is a rerun of that now, right? Right, so what began as an unprovoked Israeli strike against Iran's nuclear infrastructure and scientific community has, over the course of the last 3 days, increasingly been spiralling into a full-scale confrontation that threatens not only regional stability and jeopardises the lives of civilians on both sides, but into ever wider confrontation as Israeli allies move more assets to the Middle East. Israel's decision to initiate hostilities under the guise of self-defence is not only a blatant violation of international law, but has proven to be a massive miscalculation on their part too. They have underestimated Iran vastly, bringing destruction upon its own people and further discrediting its already widely panned humanitarian pretences and its victimhood. Or was Benjamin Netanyahu hid in Greece, allegedly, of course. Israel's airstrikes on Iranian territory have not been defensive manoeuvres, no matter how much snake oil to that effect the mainstream media tried to sell us. They were deliberate, they were calculated, provocations to create more war to keep Netanyahu in place. These strikes have targeted nuclear scientists, military commanders, in their homes at that, endangering and ending the lives of their family members whilst they were at it, and facilities that form part of Iran's energy and civilian infrastructure, all of which are legally protected under international law. The attack on the Natanz nuclear facility, notably a site well known to the International Atomic Energy Agency, the IAEA, and their inspections, was particularly egregious. Far from targeting only military and nuclear installations, though, Israel's aggression has laid bare its true intent: to cripple Iran's civil and energy capacity whilst fomenting fear amongst its population. For example, in the last 24 hours, Israel has struck Tehran's Ray and Shahran oil depots, which sparked massive fires that, although they were eventually extinguished, they could have led to ecological catastrophe and mass casualties. It's why Israel's insane Defense Minister Israel Katz has said Tehran will burn. And it's because of the targeting of such oil and gas assets by Israel like this, Iran having the second largest natural gas reserves and third largest oil reserves on the planet. And targeting these, taking them offline, will be catastrophic for global oil and gas prices. The potential disruption of global energy markets as a result of Israeli strikes is huge. Iran's a key player in OPEC, and damage to its energy infrastructure could cause a sharp spike in fuel prices worldwide, all of us taking a hit in our pockets in that respect. Several major facilities have been hit, and although damage has been relatively speaking minimal, even temporary interruptions in production or transit could impact economies far beyond that region. And yet these weren't the only targets, because when it comes to Israel, nobody they attack is ever innocent, are they? They are go-to justification to target the innocent, to target women and children. Reports confirm that hundreds of civilians, many of them women and children, have been killed in Israeli strikes on non-military sites. The current death toll in Iran being 224, with nearly 1,500 wounded. Contrast that with Israel's 14 deaths and 390 injured at time of writing. Iranian Health Minister Mohammad Reza Zarfagandi has emphasised that the overwhelming majority of those killed are innocent bystanders, making Israel's claim of precision targeting nothing more than a barefaced lie, as it is every time they claim it, frankly, entirely in keeping with their well-known track record of indiscriminate destruction, even on civilian areas. The 20 months of Gaza atrocity can attest to. But perhaps one of the most disturbing aspects of Israel's campaign, and one not getting a lot of attention, is its treatment of its own citizens right now, though. While governments normally make evacuation plans to protect civilians during wartime, Iran, for example, are opening up their subway tunnels as bomb shelters right now, Israel has instead blocked rescue flights from allowing citizens to flee the country. Anyone who wants to leave Israel right now can't. The so-called rescue operations Israel have put into practice are instead bringing Israeli nationals currently abroad back into the country, back into a war zone. They're allowed to come back in, they're not allowed to go out. It's the very opposite of protection. If it was me right now, I'd be giving such rescue flights a hard pass at the moment. It's a state-led effort to control its population, keeping those in Israel there, and bringing those who are out on holiday or whatever back in, back to residential areas, often hiding military assets. It all smacks of as many people as possible being kept in place and put in place as de facto human shields. This policy not only endangers the lives of Israelis, but it makes a complete mockery of the Israeli government's claims to prioritise civilian safety. Families seeking to escape Iranian retaliation are being trapped. They're being corralled by their own state into a situation of heightened vulnerability. Adding another layer of irony, even the US Embassy in Israel has stated that it cannot evacuate American citizens also trapped in the country due to those same security concerns, as Israel are putting it, leaving people to wonder really who is truly in control in this situation. Is it Israel, or are Israel in control of their heavily invested US and Western backers? It's not just in Israeli territory that Israel are locking down movements, though, because of course it isn't. Israel are also clamping down on movements in the West Bank, locking down cities and villages in what many Palestinians fear is an attempt to annex more territory under the cover of this war with Iran. According to Al Jazeera correspondent Nida Ibrahim, Israel has set up checkpoints severely limiting the movement of Palestinians, in some cases firing live rounds at those who approached, and in others using stun grenades and tear gas. Night raids have intensified, with residents reporting military incursions even as Iranian missiles were incoming, demonstrating that Israel's obsession with territorial domination within the occupied Palestinian territories knows no bounds. Even as Iranian missiles fall, they are still persecuting Palestinians while it's happening. The policy reeks of colonial exploitation, using the chaos of this war with Iran to press further into occupied territory. But of course this has historical precedent in Israel's history too. Its actions before, from the 1967 Six-Day War, where this happened as well, to more recent land grabs in East Jerusalem. So this dual front aggression against both Iran and Palestine reveals a state apparatus that treats violence not as a last resort, but as a means of its political survival and expansionism. It is literally the norm for Israel. So despite public statements from Israeli military officials asserting that their strikes are only targeting nuclear-linked individuals or facilities, the facts suggest otherwise. And there's more evidence we can point to show it too. Rescuers from the Iranian Red Crescent Society, the IRCS, are currently digging through the rubble of a residential building in Narmak, which is northeast of Tehran. This was hit by an Israeli missile overnight. Residential building, par for the course, isn't it? Additional drone strikes have struck densely populated civilian areas such as Syed Kandan as well, which have wounded dozens. Perhaps the most brazen attack was a drone strike on a student dormitory in Tehran, which injured at least 20 students and confirmed that civilian lives are not collateral at all here. They're deliberate targets, borne out of course by the disproportionate fatality and injury numbers when Iran appear to be causing the most damage, but with the lower civilian casualty rate. The targeting of water mains, residential apartments and ministry buildings, including those belonging to the Iranian Foreign Ministry, is all evidence of a broader strategy to destabilise Iranian society, not merely impede its military or its nuclear capabilities. And this again mirrors past Israeli strategies that we've borne witness to in Gaza, doesn't it? Where civilian infrastructure has long been a central target under the justification of military necessity, which has led to the razing of hospitals and schools and water desalination plants in Gaza, as well as homes, of course, which Israelis are particularly incensed about Iran having destroyed in Israel. But then, if Israel decide to build military assets amongst said housing, who is really to blame for that, given your government's actions? They literally started this. This whinging and victim claiming rings particularly hollow when the majority of the victims in both Gaza and Iran, where their housing has been hit to Israeli cheers, are unarmed civilians each and every time. No military assets to be seen. Meanwhile, here's an image of Ichilov Hospital in Tel Aviv. You might not have heard about it before, but it's particularly interesting here because you'll be astonished to hear, I have no doubt at all, that Israel have built an underground military facility right underneath it. I've called Tel Aviv Human Shield City a few times now in recent content, and this is exactly why. As if all this weren't enough, though, the situation now risks spiralling into a broader West Asian conflict. Qatar has issued stern warnings that Israel's actions could spark a regional war, and such fears are not unfounded, with Lebanon and Iraq and Yemen all having factions allied with Tehran. It's not hard to imagine a scenario in which multiple states become entangled in escalating conflict, especially as the likes of the US and UK move to aid Israel, whether they are openly admitting it or not. Both are moving more military assets into the area. The presence of RAF jets on standby to defend Israel, now being prepped to allegedly defend Israel, still without parliamentary approval here in the UK, incidentally. Starmer's Napoleon complex, combined with his love of dressing up in military fatigues, driving UK policy, with barely a squeak from other MPs about it, who are literally elected to hold this sort of nonsense to account. And all raises questions about the extent to which Western nations like the UK are allowing themselves to be dragged into another unwinnable war in the Middle East, and for my money, there's probably no lengths Starmer won't go to unless he is stopped. Keir Starmer's reassurances UK deployments are to defend national interests do little to quell fears and make no sense when we already have bases and military assets out there. It all has more to do with anything for Israel when they ask, from a self-confessed Zionist without qualification, and especially when those interests appear to align so closely with Israeli belligerents. The fact that even Donald Trump has reportedly refused to provide Netanyahu with the necessary armaments that he wants, he's been after bunker-busting munitions capable of hitting Iran's deeply buried nuclear sites, speaks volumes about the level of recklessness Tel Aviv is prepared to jump to and is exhibiting, and yet even Trump will still side with him and aid him, but not that far. Iran's response, whilst aggressive, has largely targeted military and governmental infrastructure as well as oil refineries and the Israeli power grid, hurting Israel where it comes to being able to refuel their jets or powering their military complexes. Israel's campaign, however, has included, as of last night, though they are denying it, car bombings in Tehran. 5 such explosions were reported in one day alone, and drone attacks on those educational institutions as well. Interestingly enough, though, ITV's Emily Schrader, not a stranger to backing Israel at all, tweeted out, "Car bombs exploding across Tehran as targeted assassinations against regime officials continue." That very much implies they are planned Israeli attacks, therefore. Utilising car bombs is an act of terror, Emily, not targeted assassination, but thanks for saying the quiet part out loud there. These are not surgical strikes aimed at reducing nuclear threats or military leaders. They are acts of terror which are par for the course for Israel, meant to incite chaos and fear and invite Iranian retribution, which has come swiftly and severely. All of the indiscriminate violence and the rhetoric from Israeli and Western leaders against Iran in Israel's interests, despite Israel blatantly and obviously having been the aggressor, draws clear-cut parallels to the run-up to the Iraq War, when false claims of weapons of mass destruction were used to justify invasion, and Israel are basically rerunning that same script 23 years later. Israel and those backing them appear to have learnt nothing from the catastrophe that destabilised the region and led to the birth of ISIS. Instead, it repeats the same pattern: launch a preemptive strike on a sovereign nation based on flimsy premises, provoke a war, and then feign innocence when civilians bear the brunt. The leaders who instigated that, your George Bushes, your Tony Blairs, got away with that. Their cells at The Hague remain empty to this day. Today's leaders evidently fancy they could get away with it too, therefore, and it's not an option they should be able to entertain. Not with Israel's war in Iran not being a conflict of necessity, but being very much one of choice, born out of political desperation, regional arrogance, and a long-standing refusal to respect international norms. The strikes on Iranian cities, on oil depots, the civilian buildings, are not accidental misfires, they're deliberate acts of state aggression designed to cripple Iran's infrastructure and provoke broader regional instability in the interest of a depraved war criminal with an arrest warrant out against him that Greece, for one, clearly don't plan on executing. In the process, Israel has not only endangered millions of Iranians, but has also turned its back on its own people by preventing them from escaping a conflict of the government's own making. It has locked down the West Bank to annex land under the cover of all this chaos, and drag Western allies into a confrontation that threatens to spiral far beyond Iran and Israel's borders. This is not defence. This is not justice. This is state terror dressed in the language of defence and deterrence. The world must not look away from this, and it must not be deceived either. Israel very much started this. Iran, for all the issues you might justifiably have with that nation, are the victims here, and they have a right to defend themselves as a sovereign state, which is what they are doing. Instead of de-escalating, as too many leaders are claiming they are wanting to do, by siding with Israel, they are doing the complete opposite. One prime example of this is, of course, Keir Starmer, flocking to Israel's aid, having no mandate to do so, and no vote in Parliament authorising him to do so either, violating not just parliamentary convention, but any scrutiny as well. Who does this man serve? This country or that one? Well, check out the details of that story in this video recommendation here as your suggested next watch to delve into that a little more deeply. Please do also hit like, share and subscribe if you haven't done so already, so as to ensure you don't miss out on all new daily content, as well as spreading the word and helping to support the channel at the very same time. It's very much appreciated. Holding power to account for ordinary working class people. I'll hopefully catch you on the next vid. Cheers, folks.